So in this screencast, I'm going to show you a nifty little trick. It's utilizing aliases in Terminal. Basically, what happens is whenever you're a web developer, a lot of times you got to go in and check file permissions and do a lot of things in Terminal, changing file permissions, changing ownership of files, things like that, navigating through directories, and sometimes the commands you use can get a bit lengthy and real repetitive, and a lot of times you just kind of want to shorten that up and wish, hey, I don't want to type this in every time I want this action to happen. So that's where aliases comes in handy, and it also helps with kind of those hard to remember ones as well. So let me go ahead and show you what alias can be used to do. So let's open Terminal. So a common task that we're going to do is just kind of see what's in the directory with permissions and ownership and all that stuff. So in order to do that, you would type in ls-la. Okay, that's going to give you ownership and all your files and folders and all that. Well, that's great. Well, some of us like one that's gives you a little more information. So ls-lahg, and kind of color codes things, makes it a little easier to read. Well, that's nice to use, but two problems. One, that's a long command to type into Terminal, and two, if you're not used to using Terminal on a regular basis, and let's say you get into doing more design work and then you need to come back into Terminal to do this, you may forget what that command is and don't need to spend 10 minutes going through Google to try to figure out what that was. So that's where an alias would come in handy. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take that ls-lahg and put it into an alias that'll be much simpler to remember and enter in, which would be ll. So if you type in ll right now, you get a bash error that says bash ll command not found. Okay, so we haven't decided to tell the system what that means. So we're going to make an alias, which is really simple. Just type in the word alias, space, you're going to use ll. That is what we are actually going to use, and use equal sign. And then in quotations, you're going to put, what is ll actually going to perform? Well, it's going to perform the ls-lahg command. Okay, close that quotation, then hit enter. Now if you type in ll, it does the same thing that ls-lahg does. So ll is an alias of that. If you want to see what your aliases are, all you have to do is just type in the word alias and hit enter, and it'll show you your current aliases. Now if you want to kind of break this apart in coding lingo, alias would be a method, if you will. ll is going to be the variable. Equals is basically us saying that we're going to define this variable. And ls-lahg is a string, so we're going to put it in quotations. So we're going to define the ll variable as this string here. So that way it stores that and we can utilize it. Well, here's a problem though. We go ahead and close Terminal and open it back up a month later. We type in ll and we get command not found. Well, the reason because we established that alias as basically a variable for that session. Once we closed that session, it wiped it clean. It was basically in a temporary file. So there's a better way to do that if you want it to save it, and that is storing it in the bash profile file, which will make it to where you can use those aliases every time without having to reestablish those aliases every time you start a new Terminal session. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. First thing you need to do is you need to navigate to the user folder for your current user. So change directory to your user's root folder, cd space tilde slash, hit enter. Let's make sure we're there. Okay. So then what you're going to do is you're going to have to pull up a text editor to either create or modify your bash profile file. And I like to use Nano. And the reason is because it's pretty simple. If the file doesn't exist, it's going to go ahead and create a file. If the file already exists, you're just going to edit it. So let's type in Nano and the name of the file, which is .bash underscore profile, and then hit enter. So it opens Nano. It says file is .bash underscore profile, and it also tells you down there towards the bottom that it's a new file. Okay, so we don't have anything in here. Well, it's pretty simple. You just put the same stuff in. And you can actually establish multiple aliases that you want it to remember every time you start it. So we're going to start with alias, that LL alias we like, equals ls dash lahg. I want to do another alias that I like to use, which is targz, and that's what I use whenever I have a file that is a .tar.gz file, and I want to go ahead and just unzip that whole file. So targz is the shortcut I use. So that's going to do tar-zcvf. And you just start new one on each of them on a new line. You don't need to do anything to terminate that line. The other thing where an alias would be nice is, yeah, that's right, okay. Where an alias would be nice is SSHing. So let's say I want to connect to a server. All right, well, I'm going to say server SSH, and you can say server admin and at your IP address of your server, and that way you don't have to remember your server username and IP address every time. All you need to remember is server. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this with Control X. Yes, we want to save it. File name to write to .bash_profile. That's correct. So let's hit return, and we're back here. So let's check to make sure we got our aliases. So alias. Okay, so we didn't get anything. Well, let's try using LL. Okay, that doesn't work. And the reason why is because bash profile is loaded when you begin your terminal session. So any changes made to the bash profile since we started our session will not be utilized until you start a new session. Or you can restart it. The easiest way is to just start a new terminal session if you're not deep into anything. So what we're going to do is we're just going to close this and start a new terminal session. Now, when we just did that, it should have loaded the bash profile and loaded our aliases. So let's type in alias, and there we go, LL and targz. Well, what happened to server? It's not working. So let's go back and see why. So we're going to go back and open it. So change directory to user folder and nano.bash_profile. There it is, server. Okay, there's the problem. There's no alias at the beginning of it. So let's put alias at the beginning of it and Control X. Yes, we're going to save to that file. Okay. Now we know it's not going to make those changes effective, so let's go ahead and restart our terminal session. And now let's type in alias and see what we get. There it is. So we've got LL, server, and targz. So if we type in LL, it's going to do that. If we type in server, it's going to try to make an SSH connection to that IP address. Well, that's not going to work because that's Google's DNS server. So let's go ahead and tell it to cancel with Control C. And now you've got that in your bash profile. So anytime you start a session with this user, it will automatically remember those aliases, and you can go in and put aliases you want, load them up in the bash profile. Every time you start a new session of terminal, it'll load up all those aliases for you. Now, two things to keep in mind. That bash profile is for this user. That's why we always navigated to this current user's home folder or root folder prior to trying to access and manipulate the bash profile. That's the first thing to remember. So if you're logged in as a different user on the same computer, it won't work. The second thing is, if you do choose to SSH into another server and you're working remotely, it does not carry your bash profile settings over to the session you established via SSH. You would have to have a separate bash profile file for that user, the user you used when logging in via SSH, and then it would carry over the bash profile settings for that user. So just keep that in mind. If you log into a server, it's going to use that user's bash profile on that server. So you might want to copy and paste your stuff into a bash profile for that username if you're going to be doing a lot of that stuff on the server. All right, hopefully you can get out there and start using aliases.